Hello, Harry Potter fans, and welcome back to The Phoenix's Tale, the weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am sharing my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. I am your host, Gabe. This week we are diving into chapter 6, The Journey from Platform 9 and 3/4. Um, and we got a lot to talk about. I don't know how well you can see this on film, but these are my notes for chapter 6 as opposed to my notes for chapter 5. A lot more detail in chapter 6, so we're going to dive right in. Brief recap of the chapter first. So, Harry returned to the Dursleys after the best birthday he'd ever had and is enjoying reading through some of his new books. And he even named the owl that Hagrid bought him as a birthday gift last week in Diagon Alley. Calls her Hedwig. We all know this. The day before he set to leave for Hogwarts, he asked Uncle Vernon to give him a ride to King's Cross Station in London, which Uncle Vernon mocked, obviously, asking if the flying carpets all had punctures. And then there's some discussion, obviously, but they do drive him to London, drop him off, but only because Harry's ticket shows the platform as platform 9 and 3/4. So naturally, the Dursleys are only doing this to let Harry figure out shit for himself. Harry meets most of the Weasley family who help get him onto the platform. Fred and George help him lift his trunk onto the train. And Ron asks if he can sit with Harry in his compartment because everywhere else is full. Along the way, Harry and Ron properly meet Draco Malfoy as well as Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle, Malfoy's two goons. He also meets Neville Longbottom and Hermione Granger. So things are getting exciting for Harry as he sets off on his new adventure. And we end the chapter with the first year's journey across the lake from Hogsmeade Station to Hogwarts Castle proper with Hagrid and arriving at the castle doors. So, there's our recap. Before we get going, you know I have to punch holes in certain things. I want to talk about let's talk about Aunt Petunia. Okay, specifically the scene where Harry's reading off his ticket about platform 9 and 3/4. I mentioned in the recap just now that Uncle Vernon, of course, mocked it. And Aunt Petunia is sitting there not saying anything. Well, we learned a couple chapters ago that she obviously knew Harry was a wizard because her sister, her younger sister, her prettier sister, her smarter sister, Lily, Harry's mom, was also a witch and went to Hogwarts. Safe to assume that she knows how to get onto platform 9 and 3/4, which we find out in the last book, in fact, that she does. And she doesn't say anything to Harry at all about how to get onto the platform. I think I assumed, and trying to go back over 25 years to the first time I read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, I think I assumed that it was just her bitterness about not being allowed to attend Hogwarts herself. Because she didn't want any part of it. So she wasn't going to volunteer that information to Harry. But the more I think about it, her decision to not tell Harry how to get onto the platform shows just how little she cares about Harry and just how bitter and angry she is toward her own sister. And as those of us who are huge fans of the books, especially, we know that her knowledge of the wizarding world pops up again a couple more times throughout the series that just kind of, throw us for a loop. This one, not so much. Obviously, she knew about the wizarding world, but we get the impression that she had no idea how to get onto the platform, which, like I said, now she knows. But just, being so bitter and angry instead of thinking about a scared, lonely 11-year-old kid trying to figure shit out on his own in the muggle world, trying to enter the wizarding world. That just speaks to just how awful Petunia is, in my opinion. So, let's get this connected to my life, because there have been moments when I have been scared too. Because I have been left alone many times to figure things out for myself. Just as we see with poor Harry at King's Cross in this chapter. The most notable for me actually came when I was about the same age as Harry was. I was about 11. And this would have been the end of my 6th grade year. My class had a field trip to one of the local high schools to watch the dress rehearsal for the Big Spring musical, which was well known in the town that I grew up, and that particular year was Oklahoma. The year before was The Music Man, and that was the first time I'd actually seen a production like that live on stage. And not only did those kids knock it out of the park, but that's when I kind of fell in love with musical theater. And Music Man to this day remains my favorite. But anyway, Oklahoma, grade 6. We returned to the school later than expected, and I thought my mom would still be waiting for me to pick me up afterwards, because obviously this is after school hours. But she wasn't there. She decided that the community group that she and I belonged to together, and we had a thing going on that night, I do believe, was more important than waiting for me, which left me with one option, because we had since moved out of that house and moved elsewhere. So I couldn't just walk to my house. My house was at least 10 miles away, maybe more. But my dad's was right there. So guess where I had to go? Yeah, that was fun. But one thing that popped up was, I don't remember my father's reaction to my sitting in his living room when he gets home from work. So I don't think anything bad happened, or at least not to me. He didn't yell at me or anything like that. And obviously I got home. I don't know if he took me home. I don't know if my mom ultimately came and picked me up. I don't remember. But it wasn't his usual bullshit, which is probably why I don't remember the reaction. It probably had nothing to do with me, if he reacted at all. But this was, to the best of my knowledge and to my memory, that this was the first time I really had been left alone to figure out something on my own, because my mother deemed something that we had been doing together as more important to just ditch me and leave me there and, whatever. Anyway, we're going to circle back in this week's psychology talk about this when it comes to my feeling of always being left alone to figure out shit, as well as the behaviors of those around me, specifically my parents. But in this case, this week, is my mom. This, as it turns out, has been a recurring theme in my life. I have been uncovering a lot of memories doing my research for this series, and just this constant struggle of being left to figure shit out on my own, with my father right there ready to shame me, to insult me, to yell at me for getting it wrong somehow and in some way, with no clear instruction. We talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago with my autism. I need very clear and precise instructions, and that need was compounded by his reaction on the other side of it. No matter what I did, somehow I did something wrong. So Harry's rising panic at King's Cross in this chapter was something that landed hard, because it's something that I not only lived for myself, But I'm finding I'm feeling a bit bitter recently as I'm working through those, especially when I see not just my dad's effect on me on that, but also my mom's. So, yeah, I've been struggling a little bit with that bitterness there. But the moments when things have actually worked out for me, such as the excitement Harry felt at having successfully navigated the barrier at King's Cross, is something that I remember feeling. I don't remember the specific moments. I don't remember the memories, the specific memories, but I do remember, okay, I got it right this time. I got it right this time. Um, One thing that I don't know if I've ever admitted to myself, so I'm going to admit it here. Um, well, actually, I haven't admitted to myself, I haven't admitted to anybody else, is how often I felt like the people around me were intentionally doing this to mess with me, to fuck me up, to cruelly entertain themselves. Like I was just a big joke to them. Let's see what stupid thing she says next, or let's see how she reacts in this situation or that situation. I felt that a lot throughout my life, especially in childhood. It just, whew, yeah, that's a heavy one for me. Feeling like I was always being set up to be the butt of somebody's joke, somebody's cruel joke for their own sick, twisted amusement. All right. So, going back to our discussion about Aunt Petunia's refusal to inform Harry how to get onto the platform is one that really stood out to me when considering this. Um, but for now, I don't want to get sidetracked here because I do have a lot to talk about. So, we're going to circle around to this, I'm sure, several times throughout the series, feeling like I was intentionally messed with by the people around me for that reason. So, um, let's shift gears because I want to talk about two of my absolute favorite characters in the entire series, and that is Fred and George Weasley. Um, this is where I say yet again just how absolute garbage I find the movies to be over the books. Because the movies do not encapsulate at all, in my opinion, the essence of the Weasley twins, who are wicked smart when it comes down to it, but they live life with the sole purpose of having fun. And this has become my personal mantra recently in my own life moving forward for about a year and a half now is follow the fun. You're going to hear me say that a lot moving forward because I had a key moment last year, and I'll dive into this again further in the series, but I had just gotten so fucking tired of feeling stressed, anxious, angry, frustrated, wasting my time, spinning my wheels, feeling stuck. I just got sick and fucking tired of all of it. Because the more I dive into this podcast to make it happen, to sit down and do my research every week to get the episodes out to you, um, things have not been easy for me, especially over the last 12 years. And how, looking back through all this and trying to start healing those wounds, how the people in my life pretty much everyone has failed me in some way when they should have been protecting me, supporting me. I don't feel that a lot in certain areas with any of the people in my life. My son excluded because I am his mother. He is, just by his very existence, the only person I have no issues, no wounds to heal, because I made that decision when I found out I was first pregnant with him. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And like I said, just by the fact of his existence, I am so incredibly proud of him. I want him to have a much happier, free to do what he wants, as long as he doesn't hurt anybody to get what he wants. Live his life the way he wants, because I felt like I have been silenced and repressed. There's a lot of other words that I could think of that are not coming to mind, unfortunately, but pretty much everybody in my life has failed me in some way. And there is a deeper emotion here that needs to be discussed. It is said in fan fiction, fan theories, I don't even know if this is canon or not, but I don't care because I love it. That the main reason that Fred and George never messed with Harry the way they messed with everybody else was because from the get-go, Harry knew exactly which twin was which. When you think about the narrative of the entire series, except the first chapter, The Boy Who Lived, we get that from more of a narrative, global scope of this is what's going on. I guess you could say that the one character in the entire book is probably who would have, whose point of view we were seeing it through would be Uncle Vernon's, but it wasn't Harry's. But the rest of the entire series was from Harry's point of view, and in the books and in the narrative, they always differentiated between Fred and George. The other bit of proof about how they treated Harry when they first realized who he was on the Hogwarts Express. Yes, they stared at Harry's scar and were a bit awestruck to find out that the Harry Potter was standing in front of them, but they didn't go on about it the way everybody at the Leaky Cauldron did, or even the way Mr. Ollivander did, or even the way Hagrid does. Hagrid is very, very protective of Harry from the get-go. But Fred and George always had this level of respect for Harry, and I don't think it was because he was the Harry Potter. It was just who Harry was as a person. And they probably figured, he gets enough shit. We're not going to mess with him. But that and the fact that he could always tell Fred and George apart, I think is why the Weasley twins never picked on him and felt very protective of him all the way through. And we're going to dive into that at other points throughout the series as well. But, and I mean, think about even when they returned to the compartment, once Ron had joined Harry and they had started talking, that they came back, they introduced themselves and Ron, and went off to find Lee Jordan, who is the Weasley twins' best friend. So how does this one speak to my life? Well, it's not like I don't have a twin. I said that wrong. It's not like I have a twin. I don't have a twin. But I do understand Fred and George so much throughout the series because of their frustration that everyone always does get them mixed up, including their own mother. I'm going to make an exception, and maybe we'll dive into this in Chamber of Secrets when we meet Mr. Weasley, when we meet Arthur. Um, Arthur always seemed to know exactly who was who as well. I'm going to keep an eye on that as I continue on with my research for this series, but I'm pretty sure that other than Harry, Mr. Weasley was the only one who knew who was Fred and who was George, excuse me. Um, but I mean, this chapter pretty much opens with, Fred joke joking with his mother, I'm not Fred, I'm George. Can't you tell us apart? You call us you call yourself our mother. Oh, sorry, dear. And oh, well, no, actually it really was Fred. I mean, everybody's getting them mixed up. And for me, it always speaks to the feelings of like I never quite fit in with my friends and my family. And as such, that adds to the feelings of being ignored or forgotten, or worse, dismissed. Like my feelings don't matter. My feelings were heard, but they don't matter. Um, so, yeah, there is. I dare say, it's not really written now that I'm thinking about the books about Fred and George, but clearly it had to have been frustrating for those two that nobody around them, not even their own family, could tell them apart, except for their father, and as it turns out, except for Harry. Harry could tell them apart. Um, but anyway, we're gonna kind of circle this back to something a little different. Harry's reluctance to ask Uncle Vernon to drive him to King's Cross in the first place. Because of my autism and because of my childhood trauma and the abuse I endured from my father, one of the things that has developed in me is hyper independence. Um, and that happened at a very early age. So when I think about this in terms of if that were my father, that I had to ask for something, let's just say that his reaction would have been basically what Uncle Vernon's reaction was. I don't think I need to explain anything beyond that. We're going to keep going. The point is that I did hate having to ask my father for anything because I was either insulted, uh, because whatever it was wrong, or I was yelled at for whatever reason and made to feel that whatever I wanted was an enormous burden to him in some way. Yeah. Hyper independence, here I come. So, keeping in that same thing, or same theme, let's talk about Ron for a little bit. Because we all know by now that he's Harry Potter's best friend, which ends up being frustrating enough in Ron's world. But we find so many clues just in this chapter as to how invisible Ron must have felt his entire childhood. Um, and not just because he's Harry Potter's best friend. That comes up a lot. But when he and Harry are first talking on the train, Ron tells Harry about growing up poor. I mean, all the hand-me-downs. He's got Bill's old wand and Charlie's old robes and Percy's old rat scabbers. He doesn't have anything new of his own, and he never had, because he is the youngest son of the family, Ginny obviously being the youngest child of the family, but the only daughter. So, um, like I said, the hand-me-downs from his elder brothers, always getting corned beef sandwiches, even though his mother knows he doesn't like them. She just keeps forgetting. The constant need to live up to his older brothers, but even if he does, it's not going to matter because they already did it first. And the fact that his entire family was or is in Gryffindor. So, when the think about when the lunch trolley came around and Harry bought some of everything and shared it with Ron. It was written in the book that it felt good having something of his own to share with this new friend of his, because Harry never got all this stuff. And he told Ron all about it. He, the way it was written, said, he didn't think it was a big deal that Ron felt the way he did, because Harry never got proper birthday presents, didn't know anything about the wizarding world, always having to wear Dudley's old hand-me-down clothes. So there's some similarities there, very different outcomes between the two boys, obviously, but a lot of similarities there, which speaks to the bigger idea that has been resonating with me lately in my own life, making this concerted effort to follow the fun, start trusting my own intuition as far as the energy that other people put out. Is this a safe person? Think about how instantaneously Ron and Harry connected, and why Ron and Harry are best friends. And instantly, because these are the types of things that up to this point, neither one of those two had anybody to talk to about these things. How much it sucks for Harry to get Dudley's old clothes that are 3 sizes too big. How much it sucks for Ron that he doesn't get anything of his own. In fact, the wand he has is not even his, it's Bill's. When Bill got a new wand, and so Ron got Bill's old wand. Things like that. And like I said, this is where I find myself struggling a little bit. After raw dogging PTSD through no fault of my own for 12 years, I'm left with just 3 people in my social circle. Literally. I got my son, I've got my mom, I've got my baby brother, often referred to as Michigan brother because he lives here. And I'm not close to anyone else in the family, seeing them once, maybe twice a year. I haven't had a job in over a decade because of the PTSD, so no work friends. And the so-called friends that I did have that of the time of my trauma event, they all bailed on me. I literally have no friends in my life right now, literally, for any sort of social anything. If I want to go out to lunch with somebody, it's got to be one of those 3, because there is nobody else. And having endured what I've endured throughout my life, and especially first over the last 12 years, but specifically over the last 2 years, going on 2 years, when this podcast idea first came to me, and making that concerted effort to protect my inner peace. I'm okay with it. It's rough at times. It's lonely at times. But compared to being with the wrong people, it is much more peaceful in my life with it being the way it is right now. And moving forward, I'm going to be very careful about who I allow into my inner circle. But it is absolutely imperative that I say this to you, and that you understand that if you are struggling and you are going through this, and you are hanging out with people, because at least it's somebody, if you're really going through it yourself and you hate the loneliness, it's okay to hate the loneliness. But remind yourself, not to gaslight yourself, but just remind yourself that, is this loneliness right now better than being with the wrong people who drain your energy, who make you feel like shit about yourself, who are shit people and only take, they never give? The solitude is worth it. It is absolutely worth it. So that kind of gets us to another thing that I do want to talk about, given the fact that of with the only three people in my life right now, I do not have the emotional support I need, and that has been part of the driving force behind this podcast and behind being more consistent with my content creation. Currently on TikTok right now, but that's going to change. Is that I still need to get this out. I am struggling to find a therapist because where I live in Michigan, mental health care is a fucking joke. I can't talk to the people in my life. Number one, my son, I will not discuss most of this with my son because he is not my therapist. Number one. But my mom and my brother, they don't care. Trust me, they don't care. If they did, they would be making the point to reaching out to me, checking in with me, seeing how I'm doing. They don't. When I attempt to talk about deeper things I need to express, my brother becomes quite uncomfortable and walks away or changes the subject. He doesn't want to sit and deal with it. My mom, she starts going down these ridiculous trains of thought that have absolutely nothing to the train of thought that I have going on in my head. And I end up getting frustrated and ending the conversation right then and there. I just can't talk to you. I can't. Well, I don't understand. In her train, it's like, no, that has nothing to do with what I'm trying to talk about. Why can't you just sit and fucking listen? Instead of trying to contribute to the conversation, why can't you just listen? And even when she does, I don't trust her to keep her fucking mouth shut. She does not have that filter. I cannot tell you the number of times. In fact, I'm going to share one. I was sharing some frustrations with her at a new job that I had, fairly new job. I was working at a hospital in the registration department. I was doing pre-registration work. I was checking insurances. I was getting the chart started, getting the demographic information from either the patient or the doctor's office, things like that. My mother worked in the same hospital, in the same department, but she did registration in the emergency room. She was the one that you saw get, at 2 o'clock in the morning. She's the one getting all your demographics and what do you need to be seen and let's call the triage nurse over and blah, 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 blah. She does that. So we had two very different functions, but we worked in the same department technically under the same supervisor. And my immediate supervisor that oversaw all the pre-registration stuff was different from hers, from my mom's. And I bitched about my immediate supervisor a lot, only to my mother. And, at one point, a few months later or a few weeks later, I don't even know, it's kind of fuzzy, but I do remember the coworker who came up to me and said, "Oh, I hear you're having trouble with immediate supervisor." The only way she could have known that was from my mother. The only way. Because I did not say shit like that. I was the new kid on the block with this job. I did not say shit to any of my coworkers about it. Anybody outside of work I could have talked to about it. I didn't say anything to them. I literally only ever said anything to my mom. And now here's a coworker saying, "Oh, I heard you're having trouble with that." It took less than a second for me to know who exactly she heard that from. I do not trust my mother for the big things, and I can guarantee you that half the county probably knows about the events surrounding my losing my job, because it did have to do with the drug addiction that developed because of the PTSD. I can guarantee you half the county knows that, because my mom does not know how to keep her fucking mouth shut. Got a lot of frustration. Like I said earlier, I'm pretty bitter about a lot of these things. So, And then you get the other side of it with my mother is, especially when I was a child, I was often met with, "What are you crying about now? Snap out of it. Don't be such a poop." Which was not fun when I was in my room crying about being yelled at by my father for something that to this day confused the fuck out of me. And how is an 8-year-old little girl supposed to say these things? "I can't help you if you don't tell me anything." Well, I'm not going to tell you anything because you can't keep your fucking mouth shut. That's what little 8-year-old me would have loved to have said. Anyway, I need to calm down. We're going to go into some psychology talk here. Because we are going to talk about emotional invalidation. And my references are in the show notes for this, so, in the description. So if you want to read more about it, yeah, really good information. Emotional validation is when a person's feelings are rejected, ignored, or judged. It can be intentional or unintentional and often sounds like, "What are you crying about now? Snap out of it. Stop being such a poop," or any other negative label you want to put on that. Other related terms sometimes used are emotional neglect. I would argue that, yeah. And minimization. Emotional neglect is broader and refers to a consistent failure to respond to a child's emotional needs, while minimization specifically refers to downplaying the importance or intensity of someone's emotions. So with my mom, I would say minimization more than neglect. My father, outright neglect, emotional neglect. So what are the effects of that on the child who is now an adult? Growing up with emotional invalidation can have significant and lasting effects. Here are some of the impacts, some of the common ones. Difficulty identifying and expressing emotions. Adults who were invalidated as children often struggle to recognize, trust, and or express their own feelings. They may feel numb or disconnected from their emotional life. Trust being the big one for me on that one. Low self-esteem and self-doubt. Repeated invalidation can lead to chronic self-doubt. Are my feelings even real or justified? And a common sense that their needs or experiences are unimportant. Yeah. People pleasing and suppression. Many learn to suppress their emotions to avoid criticism. Yes. Becoming people pleasers or overly focused on others' needs at the expense of their own. How many decisions I did not make how many decisions I made the safe choice because, oh, my mom's going to be upset with me. Difficulty with relationships. Excuse me. Emotional invalidation can make it hard to form healthy relationships. Adults may fear vulnerability, yes. Struggle with trust, yes. Or have trouble setting boundaries, yes. Increased risk of mental health issues. There's a higher risk of anxiety, depression, emotional dysregulation, and sometimes even more severe conditions like borderline personality disorder. And finally, internalized shame. Children may internalize the message that having emotions is bad or weak, leading to chronic shame or guilt about their feelings. So, yeah. I'm working on processing the things that my mom did to make things worse for me overall when it comes to my father's verbal abuse. There were things that she did and did not do that complicated the problem for me. So when I look at Ron and Harry in this chapter, we can see how both have dealt with this in their own family dynamics up to that point. I would argue that Ron's feelings are just as valid as Harry's, despite the fact that he grew up in a loving family. They all genuinely love each other and take care of each other. And, I absolutely love the Weasley family for that. But on a certain level, this is where Ron and Harry connect because they understand each other. Um, I would argue, like I said, I would argue as that Ron's feelings are just as valid as Harry's, and that instant trust that they felt in one another really does pave the way for an amazingly healthy friendship uh, between the two, because they are both comfortable expressing thoughts and emotions to one another, no matter what the circumstance. And we see that played out a few times throughout this series. I know a lot of people have some strong feelings about Ron's actions in Deathly Hallows, as well as in Goblet of Fire. We'll dig deeper into those when they happen, when we get there in this podcast. But um, he kept coming back, and he was the one to apologize. And so I get it from Ron's stance that sometimes you just have had enough, and you need to go off on your own. You need to do your own thing, which is what Ron did a couple times throughout the series. But the fact that they had such a healthy friendship and they did care so much about each other, Ron, both times, like I said, not only coming back, but being the first to apologize to Harry about all of this. So um, I would argue that it is a healthy friendship from the get go. And this is something that I have been trusting more um, as I continue to do this work on myself to feel better and to improve my own mental health. And that is that I just know that my soul family is out there. My future spouse, my future sister I never had, my future brother I never had, big brother specifically, because I'm the oldest in my family. I know that they're out there, and I trust that they will be coming into my life when I least expect it, and that the connection will be just as instant and just as strong and just as healthy, or a million times healthier than what I've had in the past, just like it was for Ron and Harry when they first met on the Hogwarts Express. One final note that I would like to mention before we close out this week's episode, because it's a specific quote from the book that encapsulates how I have been feeling about myself, my life, my path forward most recently with this podcast and some of the other things that I am starting to work on behind the scenes. And, really feeling good, feeling confident, not doubting, not stressing, but trusting that better people and better experiences are headed my way. And I absolutely love this. It was just as the train starts moving and starts leaving King's Cross Station to head for Hogsmeade and for Hogwarts, Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than he was leaving behind. Yeah, I feel it. I know it's out there. Better things, better people, better experiences, a better financial situation, all of that. It's there. I can feel it coming in. And I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to see what happens. And it's that same excitement that, despite 0 views at this point on YouTube, I'm going to keep going with this and keep doing my thing, because I know that that's going to be the key. But I am definitely ready for my own going to Hogwarts moment. I don't know specifically what that's going to be. It could be any number of things. It could be meeting that sister I never had best friend. It could be starting to get viewers and followers for the podcast. It could be some of my other things behind the scenes that I'm working on that start gaining some traction. But it's definitely going to be better than what I'm leaving behind. So, thank you all for joining me this week. Next week, we're diving into chapter 7, the sorting hat. So remember to stick to your ticket when you board the Hogwarts Express, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.